You know a spot, but not just a spot, the spot. Actually, with the all-new Nissan Frontier, you know a bunch of them. One for hitting a trail. One for catching a wave. One where this happened.
Yo, where'd our tent go?
Another where the fish get bigger every time you tell the story. Some spots, you made your mark. Others marked you. And one? Oh, okay, let's stay away from that one. But the key to these great spots? Being able to reach them in the first place. Your spot is out there. Find your frontier in the all-new 2022 Nissan Frontier. With best-in-class standard 310 horsepower, advanced tech, and 281 pound-foot of torque. Comparison based on 2022 Frontier S versus latest in-market Ward small truck segment. Base models compared based on manufacturer's website.
Spring it on with 40 to 70% off almost everything at Gap Factory and GapFactory.com. Matching styles for the family are on sale too. Shop it all through April 12th.
This is Donald Parham of the LA Chargers, and you're listening to Chargers Unleashed, part of the LAFB Network. Stay jiggy.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by UFC Fit and Temecula, Charger Bolt Family, and Brewery X in Anaheim. Wow. Dan Wolkenstein.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Dan Wolkenstein is currently recovering from being a little bit under the weather the last couple of days. Getting over being sick. Not nearly as sick as fans were on Sunday to witness the absolutely horrific game that we had to endure with the unmitigated beatdown that the Ravens gave the Chargers this past Sunday. And Dan was fortunate enough that he was dealing with wedding stuff over the weekend, not his own family wedding stuff, of course, to where he didn't get a chance to watch the game. So Dan Wolkenstein was one of the lucky ones. He did not have to endure what we endured this past Sunday. But you know what, Dan? I was thinking about this afternoon because normally, obviously, we would have been recording on Monday. We'd be getting our instant reactions. It probably was going to be the emotions were going to be flying all over the place. Now that it's Wednesday, now that I specifically and you, after you have gotten a chance to watch the game, the feelings have kind of subsided a little bit. So I don't want to take so much of a step back to that today, but you know me and how I believe in conspiracy theories and everything like that. And that you knew when you saw the final score of this past Sunday's game that, oh God, Jake Hefner, pessimistic Jake Hefner is just going to lose it on this show.
I did get quite the amount of text messages that day.
Yep. Doom and gloom, here it comes, all that stuff. And now that a couple days have passed, and now that I've had a couple days to simmer down a little bit, now it's almost like you sabotaged that moment for me. I think that there is a conspiracy theory that you kind of milked your sickness just a little bit to get to this point. Say, okay, I don't want Jake to go full nuclear mode. Let's give him a couple days to cool down a little bit, and that way the whole podcast will not be pessimistic Jake on the show. I have a sneaking suspicion that this was all coerced by you. This was your evil, maniacal plan to have this carry out this way.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot for me to take in. I'm trying to figure out how to respond to that. I would have liked to be healthy and to enjoy the last few days, but I think you're right in that I would sacrifice my own health to watch you be happy or happier today than you would have been on a Monday, say.
Right, to lose my moment to unleash, so to speak, on all the negative thoughts.
Yes, I'm sorry I didn't give you that moment. If the Chargers lose again, I will give you that moment. I promise. It's not forgotten. For those who have not watched the show for the first time or the second time, or the fourth time, or this is the first time you're watching it, welcome back. You can find us on LAC_Unleashed on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can also find us on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So yeah, Jake, the Chargers lost 34-6 against Baltimore, and there are a lot of takeaways from that game. One of which is glass half full for a sec. Chargers still atop the AFC West for now. But they kind of got beat up against the Ravens. Just call it what it is. The Chargers seem to be in their own way and not really do themselves many favors. Herbert seemed a little off at times. Play calling seemed off many times. 4th and Staley wasn't working. Our rush defense wasn't working. You call that. We literally could not rush anything. And it just seemed like one of those games that was just a bad day in the office. And there really wasn't much that went well. And whether it was the team already excited to be 4-2, ready for the bye, injuries at the linebacking position, defensive line, who knows? Nazir Adderley was missed, I think, a lot. They got beat. They got beat handedly. And personally, I mentioned there wasn't much that could have gone south if the Chargers lost this game. They look in terms of hype, only could have gone soaring high. I kind of like the idea that I don't want the Chargers to lose, but I like the idea of being humbled going into your bye week, because I think it gives your team an honest reflection of who you are and what you need to get better at. Evident, case in point, by today, Jake, Chargers go out and sign Andre Roberts to help fix their kick returning woes, which we'll talk about those too. But Lamar Jackson seemed to have done whatever he wanted, but I will push back a little bit. Like, the Chargers got beat handedly. But if you go back and watch that game again, Jake, like, it never felt like the Chargers started anything. They could never really kind of get into rhythm anywhere. And I would argue their defense wasn't that bad. It wasn't great. But like, they gave out 2 4th down conversions on offense, gave them the ball back with no time. Their special teams didn't do anything. Guy got back at the 40 at least once. Like, it wasn't terrible. Our offense was terrible. And that could be from player perspective. That could be from coaching perspective. That could be from game plan perspective. They just didn't have it. And for as hyped up as this team has been, as the fan base has been these first 5 weeks going into this game, it was a letdown. There's no other way to put it. It was a letdown. I think the Ravens were a far more physical team, and they beat us. Like, call a spade a spade. I'll be optimistic when I can, but it just, as much as they beat us, I also didn't think we really did much. Like, what are we doing? Like, my main question, Jake, after watching the game was like, what the hell was that? Like, did we play?
I was always under the impression that a football game is comprised of 2 teams that compete against one another, and ultimately there's a winner and a loser at the end of the game. I did not know that it was just the Baltimore Ravens that showed up in this game, and that the Chargers basically left themselves in LA. People were asking me, where's Austin Eckler? I don't know. He's probably still in LA. I'm not sure what happened there. But whatever the Chargers had after they defeated the Browns, they left that in Los Angeles. They did not take that with them to Baltimore.
26 yards, Jake, combined rushing. Austin Eckler had 6 carries for 7 yards.
Well, Dan, there was a lot of puzzling things in the run game. Obviously, when you got down that far, that fast, you can't go to it as much as you'd like to. I know Brandon Staley will never, ever abandon the run, no matter how bad it is. But you can't go to it as much as you want to. There were a couple of sequences where I really thought I was watching an Anthony Lynn-led offense. I think it was some point in the middle of the third quarter when we had the possession, and literally it was run, 3rd down, pass. It may even been one of those sequences where we went for the 4th down and failed. But I was just like, I was thinking to myself, like, you're down by this many points right now. And normally that we know Staley, especially after what he did in Cleveland, middle of the 3rd quarter, going for it on 4th down. Ultimately, he ended up converting it, of course, but staying that aggressive. And the Chargers weren't getting any push from their offensive line. They were getting beat handily in the trenches this past Sunday. So their running game wasn't doing anything. And ultimately, you are in this situation again where you have to put the game on your best player's shoulders. And I saw that in a lot of times throughout, whether it's, first snap from kickoff or going all the way to the 3rd quarter when the game ultimately ended up being really out of hand, that it was a combination of them not doing that, or the plays that they were being drawn up by Joe Lombardi just were flat out confusing. Herbert was flustered all game. He got emotional on the sidelines, was throwing his helmet on the sidelines. He couldn't get in a rhythm. Drops were happening again in this game. Jared Cook, there was a pass that was going to Austin Eckler in the flat that was ultimately behind him. Herbert was just off. And all the great ones have games like this. We've seen it from Tom Brady. We've seen it from Patrick Mahomes. We've seen it from plenty of the great ones that all just have the off game. But the reason I think that I was more disappointed than anything on this, Dan, it's not just, look, if this ending result happened to the New York Jets or to the Jacksonville Jaguars, yes, there would be a lot of reason for concern. The Baltimore Ravens are a great team. And despite their injuries that they've overcome, they came to play, and they did it on a short week and in a game that they had to come back in an overtime game and win. But I think that was what everybody's expectations was, is that you saw this great comeback win from the Chargers 2 weeks ago against Cleveland. You saw the Ravens come back and how they won on Monday Night Football against the Colts. And you look at what Carson Wentz did to them, and they had a 19-point advantage going into that final quarter that the Ravens ultimately overcame. And so you're thinking to yourself, with all these weapons that the Chargers have and going up against statistically a 30th ranked pass defense, that they were going to take advantage of that. And they didn't do that. And I really didn't see any opportunity or not any opportunity, but any example of them looking to do that. Marlon Humphrey, got to give credit where credit is due. He was all over the field and was covering not just Keenan Allen, not just Jared Cook.
He had a Derwin James kind of game.
Yes, that's a perfect analogy. He had a Derwin James style of a game. And they came ready to play. And that looked like a playoff team. Regardless what you want to say, I know it's week 6.
It is.
And we're now going into our bye week, but that was a team that understood how important that game was and was ready to shut everyone up on the Justin Herbert MVP conversation, because I mean, they knocked our lights out and did it in convincing fashion.
So I struggle with this because this is probably the first game where I mentioned this on Twitter after I watched the game, where this is the first game where I questioned, like, what were we trying to do on both sides of the ball? From what I saw, it seemed like we knew the Ravens were going to bring pressure. That's like what they hang their hat on all the time on defense. Justin Herbert typically is incredible against pressure. And so how do you beat pressure, throw it to where they're not, throw it to where they're coming from, be aggressive, throw it downfield? Like, the Chargers literally did the opposite of that. The Chargers were throwing it horizontally seemingly every time. Almost everything that I saw most of it was within 5 yards of line of scrimmage. Granted, yes, a lot of pressure, but you also could scheme against that too. So the Chargers, I mean, you saw a couple shot plays, but like that, you don't need a shot play to be aggressive against a blitzing team. Austin Eckler only had 4 catches. He's also batting down left and right. Then to flip it over, the Ravens, yes, like they have Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson has vastly improved as a quarterback, as a passer. But he's not Justin Herbert passing the ball. Like, I saw far too many times us giving their entire receiving core, including the tight ends, like 10-yard cushions on 3rd and 6, 2nd and 5, 1st and 10, constantly. And I'm thinking, if it's me and I'm the defensive coordinator, I want to make Lamar Jackson beat me on the outside and deep. Like, make him throw the tough throws. But don't give him these 5-yard ends, these quick shorts left and right. And it just seemed like it was happening over and over and over again. It just seemed like it was completely flipped. And I did hear some rumblings that, they showed us things we weren't really prepared for. God, I don't buy it. Nothing that they showed me was what I wasn't prepared for personally. Like, I knew they were going to blitz a ton and pressure us a ton. And I don't think the game plan we had to go up against that was a good one. And then vice versa, looking at our defense, how do you stop Lamar Jackson? Make him beat you on the outside and contain him. And we literally did neither of them. So I was more just confused for the first time in a Brandon Staley era what the goal was on both sides of the ball. Did you have that feeling at all?
I did. And when you take that as far as, the Chargers haven't been perfect through the first 6 weeks. They've obviously had their flaws, but luckily for them, they've been able to overcome a lot of their core deficiencies and even self-inflicted mistakes. But ultimately, you felt that, especially for a game of this magnitude, that Brandon Staley would have this team coming in prepared. And especially after the fashion in which they had to win the game against the Cleveland Browns, you would have thought in that circumstance that, to say, hey, okay, we can't allow this, because it's equally as good of a good rushing team over here in Baltimore. We can't have that. Offensively, we can't be getting ourselves into a hole. Not every game's going to be a shootout, even though everybody was thinking that this game had the shootout potential behind it, given both defenses had their own issues, Chargers being bad against the run, Ravens not being so good against the pass, and the way that both quarterbacks were playing at MVP caliber levels. So you really felt like this had shootout written all over it. And whether it was from Brandon Staley not having the right game plan prepared for it, Joe Lombardi's poor execution from an offensive coordinator standpoint, who knows? There's a lot of things that could be taken into play here. The Chargers just came out flat. That's the long and the short of it.
They got beaten all. They got beaten all 3 phases. I mean, we'll talk phases. We'll talk about special teams later, but there was another missed extra point, which we'll get into. There were countless hidden yards given up or retrieved by this Chargers team that are just unacceptable. Mm-hmm. Like, we can't return kicks to save our life. And when we kick off or punt, they return it on us.
Yep.
I mean, it's like 30 yards of field position every time we're on special teams, and it's gut-wrenching.
Dan, I've been talking about it since week 1, my feelings towards this rush defense. Mm-hmm. Now, once again, last in the league. I think it's now 162 yards average that we're giving up per game. Lamar Jackson, much like Dak Prescott in the game that we lost against Dallas, did not have to do much in this game. As a matter of fact, he did more than Dak Prescott because Lamar Jackson turned the ball over twice. Dak Prescott didn't do that against us. But Lamar Jackson finished 19 to 27 for 167 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. If you would have told me that without seeing the box score, I would have probably said that the Chargers won this game just by seeing those stats alone. You talk about it from the receiver standpoint, Dan. No receiver, including tight ends of theirs, had any more than 5 catches. 5. It wasn't a huge day, and they only caught 1 receiving touchdown. All their damage, of course, was done on the ground.
But even on the ground, like, if I told you the Ravens in totality had 187 yards rushing, like, I would say that's a good day, but I wouldn't say that's a back-breaking day, especially if they only had 100-something yards passing and 2 interceptions.
I'm sorry, how many total yards was it? Or how many rushing yards was it?
Rushing yards total 187.
And you said that that's not considered a bad day?
with Lamar. No, I'm not. No. With Lamar Jackson at the helm, him combined with your running backs. So you told me you gave up 187 yards rushing and 150 yards passing. I would have taken that. Like that's not the Cleveland Browns 250 yards rushing and no turnovers. They had 320 yards of offense against us? Like
Still.
No, but what I'm saying is I'm agreeing with you in that they didn't have to do much. And they didn't do much is what I'm saying. Like just put up 34 points and have 320 yards of offense? Like that's hard to do.
I see what it is you're saying. If you told me without looking at the score that the Baltimore Ravens had 180 some yards rushing, and that includes Lamar Jackson, I would have been sketchy to look at the final score. Because, yeah, okay, Dan, the 187 yards isn't the 200 plus that the Cleveland Browns put up, but they still put up 3 rushing touchdowns. And I don't think that box score is really indicative of how the game was actually going. Because a lot of those yards, and again, this may have been more self-inflicted from Baltimore, because even the announcers are saying it, that on some drives that they were doing, they couldn't understand why Baltimore was going away from the run. And that they started going more to the pass and having Lamar Jackson throw the ball a little bit more. And it's like, why would you go away from what's working right now? Because you're wearing this defense down, you're carving them to pieces on the ground. And again, what was it? They had over 100 yards in the first half alone, Dan, of that. So well before halftime even came around. So again, I don't think that those stats itself, while I understand what you're comparing, is not fully indicative of how the game itself was going. So
Baker Mayfield had more passing yards.
I get
by
that.
150 than they did as an entire team.
I get that, but look at where Baker's passing yards came from. This is the David Njoku long pass. You didn't have those opportunities in Baltimore, but still, Lamar Jackson didn't need to do much, and that is the issue that I've had, and it's been getting worse week by week. Obviously, I've been bullish on it since week 1. I've been worried about it since training camp as far as the depth goes on this defensive line. But these are the trends, and I'm sorry to say, this is not going to be something that's going to be fixable. You've proven that you can sustain it, but you can't be getting yourself into a situation where you have to rely on Justin Herbert to bail your defense out when it continues to give up long drives on the ground, and you can't make it a shootout in every game. Your defense has to do something. That's fair. It's been a blueprint since the Dallas game. Cleveland tried to take advantage of it. The Chargers were able to overcome it. And the Ravens just really emphasized how porous this rush defense is.
Okay. Now, this is very June gloom, and for good reason. The Chargers got spanked. But, I'm not one to give excuses. But they also were missing arguably, 4 of the 5 most important people to stop the run last week? Their leading tackler was out. Arguably, one of their best interior defensive line was out. Both of their starting linebackers were out. It was just a bad day in the office.
I get that. Yeah, I get that. Normally, I'd be on here screaming and yelling and say let's.
But it's Wednesday.
Exactly, it's Wednesday. You caught me on a semi good day. Conspiracy theory. So yeah, I get that. There were questionable inactives like Forrest Merrill being inactive and Brendan Fehoko getting a nod. That one kind of was questionable for me, given if your objective is to stop the run, I think that Forrest Merrill can be better for you at that. I know he's only played sparingly, but I think that he can be better when it comes to clogging a run, especially with Justin Jones being out. Yes, Drew Tranquil was a big impact of that. I think that Nasir Adderley being out was, a lot of people weren't thinking that that was going to be as big of an impact. It definitely was. It definitely was. Both Drew Tranquil and Nasir Adderley were sorely missed. Regardless of what you want to say about Nasir Adderley's play this year, people are kind of all over the board on how he's played thus far in 2021. But I think with the moving pieces that had to be around and the impact of that move causing shifts in other defensive packages for the Chargers, yeah, I definitely think that was sorely missed.
Justin Jones, Kenneth Murray, Drew Tranquil, and Nasir Adderley, all four of them, I think, are better at run stopping than they are the alternative, and all four of them are out. Now, the good news is, in theory, the majority of those guys are going to be back come the next game we play. Supposedly. In the meantime, Jake, did you get a chance to listen to some of the coaching tidbits and moments they had after the game? Was there anything that kind of stood out to you in terms of what the coaching staff or maybe players acknowledged about how they played?
I mean, Derwin being obviously most notable, just calling it what it is. Called it out as far as just the things that they need to work on. Justin Herbert was more of the same. I think Brandon Staley definitely emphasized that, took a lot of responsibility for the loss, said that he didn't coach this team well enough to put him in a position to win. There's not much you could say when you get your ass beat 34-6. No pulling punches, no excuses in that circumstance, and the Chargers weren't doing that. So if there's one silver lining, Dan, that you like to always look at it like this, at least a loss like this is happening in week 6, as you said. Fortunate for the time that you get 2 weeks to stew on it and chew it and live with it for 2 weeks before you ultimately have to come back to playing games and getting back, hopefully getting yourself back in the win column. But it's better to have this.
Get from Buffalo.
Right. It's better to have this happen now than in the middle of the playoffs. Chargers are 4-2. I said optimistically before the season started, if they could finish this 6-game gauntlet that they started with at 4-2, that would be a best case scenario. You were hoping with the way that everything was going, that you could make it 5-1. And if everything ended up panning out, as you just said, with Buffalo, you could be in a really sweet spot right now as it relates to the AFC conference standings. But hey, I get it. It was horrible to watch. It was worse to experience on a Sunday. And yes, you have to live with this for the next 2 weeks. But again, you're catching me on a really good day, Dan.
Yes.
Close the book. And as Brandon Staley, this is maybe the one comment that I really liked about Brandon Staley. Yes, you closed the book. But he said we're not entirely moving to New England as of yet. That doesn't come until next week. He said, now, evaluation time is what we really need to look at.
And this is probably Jake's most exciting part, other than, preseason and the draft and all that kind of stuff. He's like, how do teams make adjustments with their roster when it's glaringly obvious that they need to? Chargers into their bye week, and we're about to be talking about that. Jake, we did have one voicemail post-game before we get into kind of where to go from here and how to fix this team from the bye week forward. Ready to listen to the one voicemail we have? Might bring you back to your feelings back on Sunday afternoon.
Oh, this should be good. Okay, I can't wait.
All right, so again, for folks who have not called in, Chargers Unleashed hotline, 323-374-5651. Give us a call anytime you'd like to share your feelings, reactions, and we'll have you on an upcoming episode. I will be able to listen to your voicemail, but Jake will not hear it until it is live on the show. Without further ado, we have a voicemail from the 559 area code. Let's hear what they have to say following the Chargers beat down 34-6.
Love you guys. Love you, Jake Hefner. Love you, Dan Wolkenstein. Yesterday's game was absolutely abysmal, man. I was just disgusted by our run defense, man. That was ridiculous. We we couldn't stop a cold when it came to the run, man. That was absolutely abysmal. I was disgusted. But you know what? I wasn't too mad because we went into the bye at 4-2. So I'm hopeful for the rest of the season, and I think we will make the playoffs for sure with no question, and hopefully a first-round bye, and hopefully we see those dang Ravens again in the playoffs. I hate those Ravens. Screw those Ravens. But bolt up still and go Chargers.
Compassion, fearlessness, humility. These are a few things nurses are made of. And after earning a degree in finance and working in an office, I realized I'm supposed to be a nurse. It's what I'm made for. So I enrolled in Marian University's accelerated 16-month nursing program, designed for people with non-nursing bachelor degrees who want to transition into nursing. Devoted, brilliant, the list goes on. What are you made of? Search Marian ABSN to learn more.
Jake, that reminded me of like a Disney movie where it starts off really nice, and then there's like a plot twist and everything goes really dark for a moment.
Yeah,
and then at the end, it's all sunshine and rainbows again. It's lovely.
You kind of threw me for a loop, dude. I thought this was going to be like more of my type of guy, where it was just, doom and gloom. Shut it all down. Fire this, fire that. Get rid of this guy. What the hell is happening? I thought that this was going to be that type of a call, but again, you hoodwinked me, much as you've been doing with all of your conspiracy theories and runarounds and shoehorning and whatever the hell you want to call it. But overall, look,
these are all fake coughs, by the way.
That's basically this was probably Dan right after the wedding that he had to go to. This is him under an alias that he called for. This was probably like Sunday night before he got sick. That's who left that message. That sounds more like a Dan Wolkenstein call than a Jay Hefner call to me. But overall, everything that was said there was essentially what we just talked about. It's the essence of what we have to live with, take the punch on the mouth, understand where we are. If this was the Chargers sitting at 2-4, if you flip that record around and this still happened, man, I'd be asking permission from Dan Wolkenstein to talk about draft talk right now. Believe me.
Jake needs the bleep button.
Would. Yes, I would. But that's not the case. That's not the case. The Chargers are still 4-2. We're in a good spot right now, good position. And again, as we said, get through this 6-game gauntlet, and the rest of the schedule gets considerably easier as far as strength of schedules goes. So hopefully the Chargers aren't going to be able to fix everything. So don't expect a fully, a completely different team out of the bye. But at least if you can make some improvements on definitely what needed to be improved on, that's things going in the positive direction.
So, scrolling across the bottom, Jake, where to go from here?
Mm-hmm.
So, Chargers enter their bye week. They have essentially 2 weeks before they play another game. What do you think the Chargers need to address, or what can they address during this bye week non-play time? Like, what will they need to do in order to get a check from Jake Hefner in terms of they did what they're supposed to do?
Well, I mean, let's start with the obvious. Obviously, as you mentioned at the top of the show, Chargers signed Andre Roberts, former kick returner from the Houston Texans.
Pro Bowl.
A former Pro Bowler at the returner position. When you look at what the Chargers have right now at returner, it really can't get any worse. So at least this is not a sign of contentment from the Chargers. At least this is them acknowledging something. Now, do we know if Andre Roberts is going to end up panning out with this special teams unit? Because literally, it's not all the returner is not the only problem when it comes to special teams, obviously. So do we know that it's going to pan out? No, we're not, and we're not even going to pretend that we do know it all. But when you look at the overall production and the resume of Andre Roberts, it's definitely better than anything that the Chargers have had at the returner position for a long, long time. And again, it's an indictment of this coaching staff realizing that there needs to be something done when it comes to special teams. As Brandon Staley said, we can't have Justin Herbert driving 85 yards every single offensive possession. We need to put ourselves in a better position to win. So if it needs to start on special teams, because it's not getting done with KJ Hill, it's not getting done with Larry Roundtree, it's not getting done with Nasir Adderley at the returner position. there were a lot of people that we thought would take the returner position before this season started, and they ended up going a different way.
What
But at
happened to
least-
Austin Pearl, by the way?
Hey, I'm not going to assume to know anything. I never do. But that's just one for starters. So, but at least, again, it's an acknowledgement of an issue that obviously, clearly needed to be addressed.
And they did something, which, you know how many times in the past Chargers fans have been clamoring for someone to make a change and the Chargers just watch it go by and say they're fixing it, they're working on it internally, they got to execute better, blah, 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 blah. And then come and goes. Like the Chargers acknowledged it.
It's a start. It's a start.
They did something. They made action.
It's a start.
Now, I think the two other areas, there are probably more, because I know Jake likes to be pessimistic about this kind of stuff, but there are, in my eyes, two other glaring areas that I think this Chargers team could improve upon. Maybe three, but I'll say two. 2.5. One, we already talked about the kick returner. Two, I would say, is going to be a kicking situation. Do we go after another kicker, potentially have a little competition? The next one would be interior defensive line. Can we get help there? And then until we see what happens with our offensive line, can we get more depth there? That one I think is like the less of the needs than all the other ones, but you can never have enough of it. But our interior defensive line needs help, and we can't keep going on like this with the special teams. Like, you just can't. And I don't know how you fix it, because I think that it is purely a mental issue right now. Like, I don't think it's physical at all. Like, Jake, how many times did you and I try to go to the golf course? And, like, you know what you're supposed to do to hit the golf ball straight. But, like, your father-in-law's watching you, got a couple drinks in you, like, trying to figure out the wind, and all of a sudden, like, it goes the wrong direction. Like, people poo-poo kickers as if it's, like, the easiest job in the world. I'd argue it might be the hardest job of the entire team in terms of, like, mental aptitude. Like, I don't know how you fix it, because Justin Tucker isn't walking through that door.
It reminded me how long the Chargers have been in this position as it relates to their questionable kicking situation, just trying to find one. Just give me one with some consistency. And I was reminded of that when Jerry O'Connell put us in a tweet along with a couple of other Chargers podcasts as far as asking the question, thoughts on Josh Lambo being available, which
that name sounds familiar.
I respectfully said, I'll pass. And by our good friend Tyler Schoon, it was also, he found a great little piece as far as why he was in the position that he was in. And the coaches were saying that it was all a mental aspect for him. He's been going through a lot of mental struggles right now, which obviously that's no joke. I mean, like you said, Dan, it's very much a mental game when it comes to a kicker situation. And it could literally be like that old adage from the Replacements when they're talking about quicksand. When one thing goes wrong, then another, then another, then another, and then it just becomes consistent. So for that standpoint alone, yeah, I'll pass on Josh Lambo. But then I started thinking to myself, Josh Lambo has not been on this team for a while. It may seem like it's just yesterday, but that reminds me how long we've been looking consistently for a kicker, because it went from Josh Lambo to Young-Ho Koo, which you had on this team at one point before he was Young-Ho Koo, and now the man just looks like an animal in Atlanta, of course, right now.
You've gone through two Pro Bowl kickers on other teams.
Yes. And you can't find them. You can't find anybody that's going to be consistent. When it came down to the kicking war this year, you had Michael Badgley. You had Tristan Vizcaino. You had Alex Kessman. Alex Kessman looked early in training camp like he could be the dark horse to win this job. And then that ended pretty quickly. And Tristan Vizcaino, essentially in the one opportunity that it came down to in the final preseason game, got an opportunity to kick. He missed it. And the Chargers still ended up giving him the job. So I don't get it. And now I think if I'm correct, Dan, keep me honest, I believe Tristan Vizcaino is leading the league in missed PATs, not just field goals, PATs. I don't think he's leading in missed field goals, but
I think he's only missed one field goal, which is kind of funny.
He's missing in PATs, which if that's the case, do you really trust him to make it from 50 yards? Because I don't. If he's missing it from where you kick the PAT from, I don't know.
How do you fix it?
I don't know what you can do at this point. I tried. Look, if you go on right now and looking at free agent kickers, it's worrisome because the guys who are on that free agent market right now are on that free agent market for a reason.
Exactly.
For a reason. And so when I was sifting through all of this, I'm like, okay, would the Chargers be looking at bringing any one of these guys in? I don't know if they wanted to stick with guys that maybe they had a little bit familiarity with. Obviously, Alex Kessman's one. I highly doubt it would be that given the ultimate results from training camp. But I was just thinking from a familiarity standpoint because they got to watch him kick throughout the preseason. Another one was, ready for this one? Austin McGinnis. And everybody's probably like, who the hell are you talking about, Jake? This is literally me connecting every possible dot that I can think of. Austin McGinnis was a former XFL kicker, and he was with the Rams all of last season, was kind of their emergency backup kicker that they signed for a short time, brought him up to the roster. Do I have any idea how he's going to do? No. Am I advocating that the Chargers are going to sign him? No. But I'm simply saying Brandon Staley saw him kick last year. Maybe he knows what he could do. The Chargers have signed XFL players before. I don't know. This is literally how desperate the Chargers are right now. Throw every dart that you have at the dartboard and hope that one sticks. I don't know how you fix it. You're not going to fix it ultimately, but this is how desperate the Chargers are to have somebody who can simply make a PAT consistently.
I'm waiting for Jamie Tart to come in, formerly coached by Ted Lasso, to save our rear ends.
Hey,
I don't see it happening.
That might be where we have to go.
Yeah, we might have to go to fictitious characters to solve this problem.
Give me Nigel Gruff from The Replacements. He could kick the ball the whole length of the field and score. Give me that guy.
Give me the kicker in Ace Ventura. Laces out.
No. Nobody wants Ray Finkel, Dan. Now you're going the opposite direction. Now you're going of guys that we don't want to have.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
That's not
so.
Like we don't want that.
I don't know. The thing about our current kicking situation is Vizcaino. I like physically, he has what every team wants. Like, if you ask Michael Badge, kick it out of the end zone, he just couldn't do it. You can't teach a guy to kick it far. But I think you can help finesse some of the mental struggles and some of the mental strength you have to have in order to be a successful kicker in the NFL. And I think if there's a coach who I would trust in doing so, I would say it's Brandon Staley. But in the meantime, until that happens, what do you do? Do you just ask Justin Herbert to go for 2 every time and hope that he gets 1 out of 2?
That is the simple, immediate solution.
I'm kind of leaning that way. If I trust him doing 1 out of 2 and 2-point conversions more than I do a kicker kicking it in 90% of the time at this point. So I don't know. So I don't necessarily know if we're going to do anything from a kicking situation. I think we got the kick return part solved, or at least looked at. Could there possibly be somewhere we can go for interior defensive line assistance? I know Justin Jones, in theory, should be coming back. Drew Tranquil should be coming back. Lazir Adderley should be coming back. Kenneth Murray should be coming back. Is there anywhere you see us going after, defensive line-wise?
I made a little bit of a list.
I like this. Wish list.
So let's start off with Akeem Hicks. Now,
everyone's talked about him.
It's an understandable name. Familiarity with Brandon Staley definitely would be a nice interior piece that you could plug into try to help in stopping the run.
A little
Not a
crazy,
foregone
though.
conclusion, but at least maybe not give up so much yards. Here is something that I'm about to say that's going to throw cold water on this possible
No.
trade scenario that not a lot of people are going to, not a lot of people are going to like. It takes two people to execute a trade. Do I think that the Chargers will be interested in Nakeem Hicks? 100% absolutely. However, with the Bears currently sitting, at 3-3 right now? Technically, by a record standpoint, they are still in a wild card spot to try to make it. But more importantly, Matt Nagy currently is coaching for his head coaching position right now. Or yes, he's coaching for his job right now in this season. A lot of people expect him to be gone in 2022, but I think that he is trying to get every opportunity to string enough wins together that would convince the Chicago Bears front office otherwise. And I think for that standpoint alone, why, if you were Matt Nagy, or why, if you were the Chicago Bears, where you're sitting right now, would you give away a player like Akeem Hicks? Why would you do it? If the Chicago Bears had the Miami Dolphins record, this would be a completely different story. And this is where I think is going to be the one hurdle that maybe the Chargers just don't have any option for. Again, do I think that they will be interested? Yes. Do I think that they'll give a phone call? They should. But it takes two to tango ultimately when it comes to a trade. So the Chicago Bears just may not end up biting given their situation right now. And that's the one issue that I think could totally break down that trade. And a lot of people will probably say, well, why didn't the Chargers call him? It's like, we don't know that. You don't know that. So ultimately, until, fingers crossed, I'm one of the supporters of it. I think it would be a great move. He does come with a big contract, but the Chargers have enough cap space to where they could take that on. So I'm all for it. I would be totally all for it. Hopefully the Chargers give him a call. I think they will. But do the Chicago Bears bite? That's the biggest question.
So if you're the Chargers, do you go after a defensive line? Like, are you trying to get someone?
I mean, I sure would. I mean, Justin Jones, for whatever we want to say about his talent as it relates to what the Chargers currently have on their roster and him arguably being one of the better run defenders on this team. Look, Justin Jones isn't going to solve your problem.
He's not Aaron Donald.
It's just not. It's not going to be that significant of a difference. Okay, so what? We're giving up 162 yards a game. Maybe Justin Jones brings it down to 150. I mean, at the end of the day, who cares? It's just, that's not enough. So if the Chargers are going to be buyers at this free agent deadline and are going to make an ultimate push towards the playoffs, where their run defense is going to have to get better, not ultimately fixed, but get better. If you're expecting this Chargers team to end up with a top 10 run defense with a trade acquisition like this, it's not going to happen. Okay, just get that out of the way right now. But if you could be somewhere in the middle of the pack where it's sustainable, then you could ultimately do something. Do I think that they're going to get there? No, but see what you could do. At the end of the day, it's like we said with the kick returner and Andre Roberts, at least you're acknowledging something that's a problem and you're doing something, which historically this team has never done when it comes to the trade deadline, mid-season trades. Tom Telesco has never traded for a player. He's traded a player for draft picks, but never actually acquired a player during his tenure as a GM.
Now, there's been a lot of negativity and a lot of realism spewed. hey, yours truly as well. But again, let's put it in perspective. Chargers got their ass handed to them this past week. Also true is the fact that the Chargers are 4-2. All Chargers fans would have dreamed to be 4-2. Tied atop the AFC West. One game ahead of the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC West. With, I think it's like the fourth easiest schedule in the NFL for the remainder of the season. So some of these June and gloom statistics are going to improve purely based on the competition we're going up against. Like, the Chargers could literally do nothing, and their statistics will improve because they're not going up against the gauntlet that was the first 6 weeks. The Chargers could also play better and then improve it even that much more. the Chargers could also get healthier and improve that much more. So as much as the second loss of the season sucks, it was only the second loss of the season. So, pump the brakes a little bit now. And I will say, Jake, I am very proud of a lot of Chargers Twitter. Because I saw folks come out of the woodworks to start talking as if they were me, saying things like, okay, guys, hold on, relax. They just lost the game. It's not like they're crazy. It's 4-2. They're still above. I'm like, thank you. Level heads are prevailing. This is nice. Did the loss suck? Yes. Should we have come out and performed better? Yes. Were we not nearly as physical as we should be? Yes. Am I disappointed in what the game plan was? Personally, yes. But in totality, the team outperformed everyone's expectations going into the bye week. Fact. So, call a spade a spade. Where the losses happened, I don't care. But they're 4-2, man. This is a damn exciting time to be a Chargers fan.
Before I give my final wrap-up thoughts, as Dan Wolkenstein just gave right there, a couple other names I had on my list as far as D tackles goes. Maybe not a lot of people are talking about. Maybe it makes sense. Not saying that it's ultimately going to come to fruition, but if we're talking about D tackles, because that is the most prominent one that everybody's looking at for the Chargers to make a move for.
And Jake would love it.
Yes, I would. Now, I just said Chicago Bears are not in the situation that the Miami Dolphins are in right now as it relates to record. So, why wouldn't you look towards the Miami Dolphins? They've got some talent along their defensive line. How about one in particular named Emmanuel Ogbah? Now, one of their premier defensive players. Will the Dolphins let him go? Personally, I don't think so. But he's in a contract. He's in the final year of his contract. Could you get something back for him? I'm not sure, but that would be a nice addition to the defensive line. Again, do I think the Dolphins are going to get rid of him? No. I think he's part of the nucleus of that defense. Would end up being one of those players that, to me, would be untouchable for them. So even in a contract situation, because he's definitely playing for his money right now, I don't think that he's going to do it. Or I don't think that they're going to do it personally. So I look some other places. San Francisco's got a lot of depth at their defensive tackle position. One player in particular that I was surprised to see get released from the Raiders earlier this offseason, who I've been a fan of since he was in Michigan, who I was hoping that as he was falling down draft boards, that the Chargers would ultimately draft him, and they didn't.
In one breath.
How about Maurice Hurst? Is he the biggest, most physical guy? Is he a game changer? No, but at least add something to that defensive tackle depth. He's only on a 1-year deal in San Francisco, would not have to cost you a lot, probably even less from a standpoint of draft compensation for. But I love his versatility. Again, I was very surprised when the Raiders let him go this past offseason. I think the combination of what you're going to be going for moving forward, because you're going to have to with Linval Joseph's contract coming up, with Justin Jones' contract coming up. If your idea is to stay young along the defensive line, with what you have with Jerry Tillery being the one notable contract that will still be on the team in 2022, I would like to see what a pairing of those two could do along the interior of the defensive line. So again, this is how many bullets I have, and this is the way that I'm shooting. By no means do I think that any of these moves are ultimately going to come to fruition. But hey, this is what you do on a bye week. This is what happens when you get to sit and stew and think about how your team can possibly improve. So, to my final thoughts, as Dan Wolkenstein put out just before I went off on that little rant. Yes, I was a little bit surprised to see as many Chargers fans on Twitter not go full doom and gloom.
It's impressive.
Now, I will say this. If the Chargers ended up losing the game against the Browns and they follow that up with the same result against the Baltimore Ravens, it probably would have been a little bit different. You're one game away possibly from a complete different atmosphere in the Chargers Twitter sphere. So, yes, I'll say it from that standpoint. Ideally, they were right where I hoped they would be came the bye. 4-2 record. I said that would be the best case scenario. They had a shot to be better, and I was hoping that they would be. But they are in the best case scenario that they could have ended against a gauntlet of a 6-game stretch. Now comes the real test is, how do you respond? How do you respond? Because when the Chargers come out of the bye week, they go up against the New England Patriots. New England Patriots last year trounced the Chargers 45-0. 45-0. Bill Belichick has a impeccable record when it comes to coaching against rookie quarterbacks. And yes, Justin Herbert is no longer a rookie quarterback. And yes, we're talking about different personnel and different coaching staff. But New England, if we're talking about the same thing that we've been having issues with, me in particular, for the last 5 months, they have the offensive system to beat this team. And we'll get into that more when we're talking about it next week, ultimately with our game predictions. But with a rookie quarterback that they have now, you know that their emphasis is going to be to run the ball. So hopefully this team can make some adjustments. You're going to get some players back, and you're not going to stop the bleeding, but can you just... You're not going to hemorrhage. Hopefully you don't hemorrhage. Just, here and there. You're not going to ultimately stop it, but just here and there. But ultimately, I think that Brandon Staley will come back. Yeah, there you go. Minor flesh wounds. Hopefully Brandon Staley comes back with a better game plan of how he wants to execute on a week-to-week basis. We'll see what happens with the trade deadline coming up on November 2nd. Maybe the Chargers make a move in between now and the New England game. We'll see. You just have to get better. And it starts in New England. And hopefully that should be the catalyst of what takes you through the rest of your easiest schedule, hopefully to a playoff berth this year.
Now, Jake, I think a good way to end this is there was so much hype going into the season about how good this team could be and how different it is, and the new coaching staff, and Rashawn Slater, and Asante Samuel, and Herbert, and Derwin James back, all that stuff. The first 6 weeks, I think, showed me that this team is who I thought it was. In terms of, they are pretty damn good. If they can put it all together. The biggest test for me, though, moving forward is it true? Because years past, Chargers play up and down to competition. And when they go up against teams that they're supposed to win, handedly, for whatever reason, they didn't. There were always letdowns. Is this Chargers team going to be different? We're going to be going up against teams this coming next few months that the Chargers are far better than. At least it's supposed to be that way. So the test for me is, first 6 weeks, Chargers, I think, performed better than we all thought that they could. If they play the same way the last part of the season, Chargers in the playoffs, Chargers look good. But who knows? The year is still young. So, Jake, that's going to do it for this episode of Chargers Unleashed. You can find Jake Hefner at Jake T. Hefner on Twitter.
Thank you for just leaving it at that. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. You can find myself at Chargers Homer on Twitter. Again, you can find us at LAC_Unleashed on Twitter. You can also find us on YouTube, where you can subscribe and follow and like for all the subscriptions that you can find. Jake, anything else you want to tell the good people before we sign off? It's a bye week. People got to get rested.
Hey, the Chargers aren't losing this week. I could put money on that. At least I know that I can enjoy a Sunday where I don't have to be on a pacemaker, have heart palpitation, chew my fingernails down to the bone. At least I know I do not have to experience that come this Sunday. 2 Sundays from now, maybe a different story. But this Sunday, I'm good. I'm calm, I'm cool, I'm collected. I'm ready to go into this bye week. We're good.
Sweet. All right, guys. For Jake Hefner, Dan Wolkenstein here from the LAFB Network, thank you so much for tuning in. We have some exciting things planned in the next few months for LAFB and Chargers Unleashed, so be on the lookout for that. Until then, have a great rest of the afternoon, evening, morning, and week, wherever you are. And we'll talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed.
Go!